I've made a fortune dancing on the graves of investors who believed that this time was different. It isn't. And the market is about to give them a very expensive lesson. This younger generation, Gen Z as they call themselves, believes they've discovered a new way to interact with the world that doesn't involve sacrifice, commitment, or, God forbid, showing up to an office. They think they can hack the system from their bedrooms while quiet quitting their way to a six-figure lifestyle. It's a delusion of grandeur that is going to leave them broke, bitter, and completely unprepared for the brutal reality of a capitalistic society that doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about one thing, cash flow, and right now the human capital of this country is burning cash at a rate that would make a Silicon Valley startup blush, based on nothing but the promise of future balance. Let me tell you something about balance. You can't balance a checkbook that has no deposits. I've spent 50 years looking at the world through the lens of supply and demand. It's the only law that never gets repealed. When everyone is zigging, I zag. When everyone is buying, I'm looking for the exit. And right now, the supply of entitled, unproven, and distracted labor is at an all-time high, while the demand for actual high-stakes results is getting tighter by the minute. You see these kids on social media talking about setting boundaries before they've even set a goal. They're obsessed with the optics of their life rather than the fundamentals of their output. They are essentially buying their own hype, and in my book, that's the fastest way to go bankrupt. Everything in business comes down to the margin of safety. When I buy a distressed apartment building or a failing REIT, I'm looking for the floor. I want to know how much I can lose if everything goes to hell. Gen Z has no floor. They have no capital preservation mindset because they haven't built any capital to preserve. They're operating on a deficit of experience and in surplus of expectation. They've been told they are special for so long that they've forgotten that in the marketplace, you are only as special as the revenue you generate or the costs you save. If you aren't doing either, you are a liability, and in a high interest rate environment, which is where we are in 2026, liabilities get liquidated. I'm a grave dancer. I've spent my life waiting for the exuberant to trip over their own shoelaces so I can pick up the pieces for 20 cents on the dollar. And as I look at the workforce today, I see a graveyard of ambition. I see people who think they are disrupting the corporate world by refusing to participate in it, not realizing that the world will simply move on without them. They are creating their own obsolescence. They think they are illiquid because they have unique perspectives, but the reality is they are just plain old unmarketable. There is no illiquidity premium for someone who refuses to learn the trade. Let's talk about replacement cost. In real estate, if I can buy a building for less than it would cost to build it from scratch, I've got a deal. In the labor market, if I can replace a quiet quitter with a hungry kid from an emerging market who is willing to work 18 hours a day for a fraction of the price, why wouldn't I? The work from home delusion has done more to lower the replacement cost of the American worker than any trade deal in history. Once a job can be done from a bedroom in Brooklyn, it can be done from a bedroom in Bangalore or Bogota. Gen Z thinks they're winning the flexibility war, but they've actually just globalized their own competition. They've removed the barriers to entry that kept their wages high. They've turned themselves into a commodity. And as any commodities trader will tell you, when supply is infinite, the price goes to zero. I've always been a big believer in the idea that you have to be the low-cost producer or the high-value provider. There is no middle ground. Gen Z is currently neither. They are high cost because they demand perks, wellness days, and constant validation. And they are low value because they lack the muscle memory of hard work. They haven't spent the hours in the trenches. They haven't seen the cycles. They haven't felt the blood in the streets. They are fair weather workers in a world where the storm is just beginning. I'm going to tell you exactly where I'm seeing the corpses that are going to be the most profitable to dance on in this economy. But first, we need to address the exuberance of the modern career path. Everyone wants to be a creator, an influencer, or a founder. Nobody wants to be the guy who understands the plumbing. Nobody wants to be the guy who knows how to read a balance sheet or manage a distressed asset. They are chasing multiples while ignoring the basis. They are betting on the ceiling without checking the foundation. I remember back in the 70s when the economy was in the tank and everyone thought the world was ending. I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about the cash flow. I went out and bought thousands of apartment units when nobody wanted them because the math worked. The math doesn't care about your work-life balance. The math doesn't care about your mental health day. The math only cares about whether the rent covers the debt. And if you are an employee, you are an asset on someone else's balance sheet. If your maintenance cost exceeds your production value, you are going to be disposed of. It's not personal, it's just arithmetic. The growth analysts, those guys in the fancy suits who have never actually built anything, will tell you that the new economy is all about human-centric leadership and empathetic management. That's a load of crap. Real leadership is about survival. It's about making sure the ship stays afloat so that everyone can get paid, and you don't keep a ship afloat by letting the crew decide when they feel like rowing. You keep it afloat by demanding excellence and rewarding results. Gen Z has been sold a bill of goods by people who are trying to sell them coaching and master classes instead of telling them the truth. The world is a competitive zero-sum game for resources. I've always looked for asymmetric risk. I want to be in situations where if I'm right, I win big, and if I'm wrong, I don't lose much. Gen Z is taking the opposite approach. They are taking symmetric risk with a downward bias. They are sacrificing their most valuable asset, their youth and their energy, on the altar of comfort. They are investing in leisure time that has no future value. They are capitalizing on short-term trends that will be forgotten by next Tuesday. They have no margin of safety for when the real recession hits. And believe me, it's coming. We've had a decade of cheap money and easy wins that has made everyone soft. The hangover of 2026 is going to be brutal for those who didn't spend the party preparing for the cleanup. I'm looking at the landscape right now and I see a massive opportunity for the grave dancer. I see a generation of small business owners who are going to go bust because they can't find reliable help. I see companies that are going to fail because their culture was built on Slack emojis rather than shared sacrifice. I see real estate that is going to be liquidated because the people managing it didn't have the discipline to watch the expenses. These are the corpses I'm interested in. I'm looking for the assets that are fundamentally sound but have been mismanaged by people who thought the good times would never end. I've never been afraid to be the bad guy. I've never been afraid to tell people what they don't want to hear. And the truth is, if you aren't willing to be the hardest working person in the room, someone else will be. And that someone else is going to take your desk, your client, and eventually your lifestyle. Gen Z talks about equity, but they don't understand that true equity is earned, not granted. You can't redistribute work ethic. You can't subsidize grit. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't, you are a distressed asset in the making. The most distressed part of this whole equation is the lack of intellectual curiosity. These kids think that because they have a smartphone, they have information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is what you get after you've applied information and failed a dozen times. Knowledge is what stays with you after the app crashes. Gen Z has a short-term focus in a long-term game. They are day trading their careers, looking for the quick bump in salary or title, rather than building a portfolio of skills that will pay dividends for 40 years. They are over-leveraged on their own potential and undercapitalized on their actual abilities. I'm a pragmatist. I don't care about should, I care about is. And what is happening right now is a total breakdown in the value chain of labor. We have a generation that is illiquid in terms of talent. They can't sell themselves to the highest bidder because they haven't produced anything worth bidding on. They are waiting for the market to adjust to them, not realizing that the market is a heartless machine that only adjusts to supply and demand. If there is a surplus of mediocre and a shortage of exceptional, the price of mediocre is going to crash. I remember when I was starting out delivering magazines or managing small apartment buildings, I didn't have a vision statement, I had a survival instinct. I knew that if I didn't produce, I didn't eat. That hunger is what's missing today. You can't teach hunger. You can't onboard it. It comes from a realization that the world doesn't owe you a living. Gen Z has been insulated from that reality for so long that they think comfort is a human right. It's not. It's a reward for capital preservation and downside protection. It's the upside of a life well lived and a career well managed. If you want to be wealthy, you have to be willing to do what others won't. It's that simple. If everyone wants to work from home, you show up at the office. If everyone wants to quiet quit, you loudly commit. If everyone is chasing the latest thing, you master the timeless things. That's how you create a barriers to entry for yourself. That's how you become a unique asset that can command a premium. But that requires a work ethic that is currently out of stock for most of Gen Z. They are too busy optimizing their lives to realize they are minimizing their futures. I'm looking at the secondary markets of human capital, the places where people are still hungry, where people still value the opportunity more than the perks. That's where the real growth is going to come from. The primary markets, the big coastal cities, the tech hubs are overbuilt with ego and undersupplied with effort. They are bubbles waiting to burst. And when they do, the grave dancer will be there to buy the distressed talent for pennies on the dollar. I'll take the kid who's been overlooked because he doesn't have the right degree but has twice the hustle, and I'll put him in a position to win. Because at the end of the day, I'm betting on the jockey, not just the horse. The work ethic of Gen Z is a trillion-dollar bomb because it's a systemic failure. It's not just one kid being lazy, it's an entire cohort that has been programmed to value process over results. They think that participating in a meeting is the same as solving a problem. They think that being busy is the same as being productive. It's a valuation error of massive proportions. They are marking to market their own vanity while their actual worth is depreciating every day. And that depreciation is a silent killer because unlike a piece of machinery, you can't just fix a human being with a new part once they've lost the ability to focus. We are entering a period where the illiquidity premium of actual seasoned talent is going to skyrocket. Why? Because the supply of people who can actually execute, who can handle the stress of a distressed asset or navigate a high-stakes negotiation without needing a safe space, is dwindling. This is the asymmetric risk that the growth analysts are completely missing. They see a tech-savvy generation. I see a generation that has traded competence for convenience. I've always said that in business you have to be able to look in the mirror and see what's actually there, not what you want to see. And what's there right now is a fundamental breakdown in the apprenticeship model that has built every great fortune in history. You can't learn the nuances of a deal over a Slack channel. You can't feel the tension in a room or the tell of a seller when you're looking at them through a grainy Zoom window. Gen Z thinks they are optimizing their time by avoiding the office, but they are actually liquidating their future value. They are missing out on the unwritten rules and the dark arts of business that are only passed down through proximity. They are becoming commodity workers who are easily replaceable by the next version of an AI or a hungrier worker in a developing nation. That is the definition of a bad investment. The work-life balance mantra is perhaps the most effective marketing campaign ever designed to keep people poor. In my world, there is no balance. There is only results and excuses. I didn't get to where I am by worrying about whether I had enough time for my hobbies. I got here by being obsessed with the cash flow. I got here by realizing that if I wasn't at the table, I was on the menu. Gen Z wants to be equity partners without putting in the sweat equity. They want the upside without the downside protection of actually being indispensable. They are essentially trying to buy a call option on success without paying the premium of hard work. The market doesn't work that way. The market is a cold, hard calculator that eventually settles every account. I told you I'd reveal where I'm seeing the most profitable corpses in this market, and it's right in the middle of the businesses this generation is currently abandoning. I'm looking at the boring industries, the ones that require physical presence, grit, and 24/7 management. I'm looking at specialized manufacturing, regional logistics, and dirty service businesses that produce massive cash flow but aren't cool enough for an Instagram story. These businesses are being sold for a song because the next generation of owners doesn't want the headache of actually managing people. They want a passive income stream while they travel the world. Well, there is no such thing as truly passive income in a competitive market. If you aren't managing it, someone else is stealing it. I'm the grave dancer, and right now I'm looking at the graves of thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises that are being run into the ground by lifestyle owners. These are distressed assets in the making. I'm waiting for the moment when their lack of discipline hits the wall of 2026's higher interest rates, when their creative agencies and consultancies can't cover the rent on their fancy co-working spaces. I'll be there. But I won't be buying their brand. I'll be buying their client lists and their core infrastructure for pennies on the dollar, and I'll put people in charge who actually know how to work. That's how you buy wholesale and sell retail in the talent market. The replacement cost of a Gen Z employee is reaching a point where it's becoming a liability for major corporations. For a decade, companies pandered to them because capital was cheap and we were in a growth at all costs phase. But in 2026, we are in a survival of the fittest phase. We are in a capital preservation cycle. Boards of directors are looking at their payrolls and asking, why are we paying a premium for someone who only gives us 60% of their effort? The answer is they won't. We are going to see a massive repricing of human capital. The junior salaries that inflated during the bubble are going to crater. The perks are going to disappear. And the people who didn't build a margin of safety in their skills are going to find themselves in a very crowded, very poorly paid job market. I find it hilarious when I hear these experts talk about the great resignation or quiet quitting as if it's a permanent shift in power. It's not a shift in power. It's a temporary malfunction caused by an excess of liquidity. When the liquidity dries up, and it is drying up, the power returns to the person who holds the capital. And the people who hold the capital are the ones who didn't spend the last 5 years quiet quitting. They are the ones who were in the office, building relationships and positioning themselves for the crash. They are the ones who understand that in a crisis, your only true asset is your ability to solve a problem that nobody else can solve. The work-from-home delusion is the biggest threat to the wealth of this generation. It's not just about real estate, it's about the erosion of the social contract of work. When you don't have to look your boss or your colleagues in the eye, you don't feel a sense of shared mission. You become a service provider instead of a team member, and service providers are much easier to fire than team members. You are stripping away your own barriers to entry. You are making yourself a line item instead of a partner. If I can replace you with a cheaper version of you on a screen, I will. I've never been afraid to make the tough calls, and I can tell you that every CEO I know is currently looking for a reason to cut the fluff. Gen Z has provided them with a mountain of reasons. I'm positioning my capital in the real economy, the one that requires calloused hands and a clear head. I'm looking at the trades, the essential services, and the specialized real estate that houses them. While Gen Z is trying to monetize their brand, I'm monetizing their basic needs. I'm buying the apartment buildings where they'll have to rent because they didn't save for a down payment. I'm buying the logistics centers that deliver the products they order because they're too anxious to go to a store. I'm becoming the plumbing of their lives. And because I have a lower basis and a higher margin of safety, I'll be the one collecting the rent for the next 30 years. My advice to anyone who actually wants to be wealthy is simple. Ignore the noise of your peers. Stop looking for balance and start looking for dominance. The world is a competitive zero-sum game for the best assets and the best positions. If you aren't fighting for them, you're losing them. Focus on the cold, hard numbers of your own life. What is your cash flow? What is your replacement cost? How are you building barriers to entry around your own career? If you can't answer those questions, you are a zombie asset, and the grave dancer is already eyeing your headstone. The logical conclusion for where to position your capital right now is in the anti-trend. If everyone is avoiding the trades, invest in the trades. If everyone is avoiding the office, find the mission-critical office assets and buy them at a discount. If everyone is quiet quitting, become the most visible and valuable person in your organization. The contrarian move is always the most profitable because it allows you to buy when there is no competition. And right now, there is zero competition for hard work and physical presence. That is the greatest inefficiency in the market today. You need to stop listening to the growth analysts who are telling you that this time is different and that we've entered a post-work era. That is a lie designed to keep you compliant and poor. The fundamentals haven't changed since the 1970s. Supply and demand still rule the world. Cash flow is still the only thing that pays the bills. And capital preservation is the only way to stay in the game long enough to win. If you ignore these truths, you are destined to be a victim of the next cycle. I've seen it all before. I've seen the youth movements that thought they could reinvent the laws of economics. They always end up in the same place, broke and asking for a bailout. Don't be one of them. Be the person who buys the bailout. Be the person who sees the opportunity in the failure of others. Be the person who understands that a bloodbath is just a sale for those who are prepared. Get your house in order. Focus on the fundamentals. Ignore the hype. And for God's sake, get to work. The grave dancer is watching, and I'd much rather dance with you than on you, but I'll do either one if the price is right. Now, if you found this useful, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It's the only way you're going to stay ahead of the curve while everyone else is busy self-actualizing their way to the unemployment line. And look, if you think I'm wrong, if you think quiet quitting is a genius strategy or that showing up is outdated, then by all means, leave a comment below. My team and I will be looking through them. Tell me your thesis. Show me your data. But let's be clear. I'm interested in arguments based on real-world fundamentals, not your feelings. If you've got a real case to make, I'm all ears. If you're just high on participation trophy energy, don't waste my time. I've got a multi-billion-dollar portfolio to manage and a lot of graves to dance on. Would you like me to analyze the specific basis of the trades versus the growth sectors for your next move?